In this video, we're going to look at how to create a research proposal. So again, if you are hiring someone to do the research for you, so you're going external, you've created a request for a proposal, and then in come these proposals. So let's look at what would be in those documents that they would provide to you. If you're going internal, so you've created a research request to request from your boss time and resources to do a research project, then that's a very preliminary request. And then you would follow that up with a proposal that had the details. And those details are going to involve your plan for your research design, your research methods, your sampling methods. And so I'm just going to scroll up. In our previous videos, we talked about different research designs, whether you are trying to gain more background information, you're trying to brainstorm, so it's more exploratory research, or whether you are trying to describe phenomenon, how people feel, the characteristics of individuals, so you're trying to answer who, what, where, when, where, who, what, when, where. I should put these in the same order we always use them. Who, what, when, where, and how. Then it's going to be more descriptive, right? If we're doing more surveys. And if we're trying to determine if something happens, then something happens. So more cause and effect. We have a causal research design. That will inform the type of research methods that you are using. So there are different methods within each design. And then we're also going to have to determine our sampling method. So our proposal will outline these pieces. Okay. We'll also have other videos where we'll go through each of those and how to do them. So check out for those videos. But right now we're looking at creating a marketing research proposal. So let me scroll here. So let's start by defining that that research proposal. Again, these slides I made when I taught a marketing research class. So it all has marketing in front of it. But this is the same research processes, even if it's not in a marketing role. So just ignore the words marketing, unless that's your area. All right, so a research proposal is a document. A document developed usually in response to an RFP, okay, that represents research objectives, research design, timelines, and cost of project. So when you're building a research proposal, it will have a general format. It will have a title page. It will have a problem statement. It will have research objectives. How will we know if this research project is successful? It will have your study design. So that's your research design and your methods. It will have areas of questioning, so examples in terms of the type of information that's being collected. It will outline the data analysis method, so how are we actually going to analyze the data once it's collected? Who is involved in this project? What are any assumptions that are being made? So if this is a response to an RFP, there might be assumptions that the company asking for the research is going to provide certain information or do certain things, and the company being hired is going to do certain things. So any of those specifications are going to be outlined. Any assumptions, like assuming that the sample we're using is representative of the greater group, those assumptions need to be laid out. If you are doing this, whether it is for your boss or internal, or whether you are doing this for a client, the assumptions are very important to outline in your proposal. That's because if the recommendations that come out of your research say the organization should do blah, and that turns out to be a disaster and a bad recommendation, those assumptions are very important, because your assumptions, if they hold true and you followed good statistical processes and ethical processes, then if those assumptions are true, then your recommendations should be good. They should be valid. Now, there's always going to be error. No one's perfect. No one can predict the future. But they are going to be stronger and more valid if those assumptions hold true. But you need to include all those assumptions, because if any of them don't hold true, then that would explain why the recommendations didn't turn out to be as successful as you had forecasted, right? So you want to be very explicit as to all the assumptions you made when you did the project. What are the services that are being provided? What is the cost of the project? What is the timeline? When are the different deliverables happening? And then you might have an appendix with additional information, for example, calculations on things like sample size. All right, so let's go through these. All right, so first, title page. That title, if you are you responding to an RFP, that title should match, okay? This should also include the name of the preparers of the proposal and their contact information, and who the proposal is being prepared for. Are you preparing it internally for your boss? Are you preparing it for a business that has hired you? And the date. So as we go through this, I'm just going to show you. Here we go. Here's a proposal. This proposal was done by faculty and students at Red Deer Polytechnic for Hockey Alberta. And so you can see here on the title page that it is an economic impact study for Hockey Alberta. So there's our title. It's being prepared for the director of Hockey Alberta. Here's the date and who is preparing this document and their contact information. Okay, so let's just go back. So we can see title, name of preparers, who it's for, and the date. The next thing we want to include is a problem statement. So the problem statement needs to have the company or principals involved. So if you are doing this for someone who hired you, this is about the company that hired you. And then what we have in our problem statement is the symptoms. What has been observed by the organization that leads them to think that they have an opportunity or a problem? What are some possible causes of these symptoms? So what this is in this problem statement is taking you back to this very first part here. We recognize the problem, determine the motivations, looked at the context around it to help make sure that our research problem really gets to the heart of what the organization needs to know to make a decision. So the information you gain from these first couple steps here is what is going to go in this problem statement. So what do we know about the company? What are they observing? What are some possible causes of these symptoms? Starting to narrow down that focus, that scope of this project, converting it from that management decision problem into a research problem. Is it an opportunity? Is it a failure to meet an objective? Is it planned? Is it unplanned? Because remember our discussions previously that what you are doing for your research, the type of research problem that you're asking, is really going to depend on whether or not the issue is planned or unplanned. Whether we're trying to create an opportunity, the gap between what has happened and what could have happened, or the difference between what happened and what should have happened. So are we dealing with an opportunity or a failure? So we'd outline in that problem statement. So let's look here. Here's the problem statement, Hockey Alberta. So some background about Hockey Alberta, founded in 1907. They exist to create valuable opportunities for participants. They receive generous grants. And so they would like to provide current and potential investors with a measure of the return on their investment. So what they want is they want to be able to say to people who give money to Hockey Alberta, for every dollar you give to Hockey Alberta, here's the impact it has on your community. Not just those who are playing hockey, but to those who own the restaurants and the hotels, and that ripple effect it has across the community. So we're defining that problem statement here, saying, okay, well, here is an opportunity, because if people know what impact their donations have, then they're more likely to engage with Hockey Alberta. Okay, so that's our problem statement here about the company, the symptoms, the anticipated use of the research information obtained. Okay. Then we're going to have a statement of our research objectives. How do we know if the project is successful? If you are responding to an RFP, the RFP probably already included those research objectives, and you are restating them if they were provided. Okay, so making it clear that you are understanding and everyone has an agreement as to what a successful research project looks like. In the example here, a successful research project will determine the goods and services purchased because of association with hockey, determine the amount of individuals, the amount that individuals spend locally and around the province. We'll look at how much every dollar spent has on the community and project forward the impact that Hockey Alberta has on the provincial economy over 5 years and beyond. So here's how we will know the research project is successful. In this case, there's some forecasting that's going to happen. There's going to have to be some surveys that are going to happen to collect that data. All right, so then that's our research objectives. If they are not clear in the RFP, or you want to add additional objectives here, you can as well, to make sure there's clear understanding what a successful project looks like. The next section is about study design. So what is the research design? So what were those 3 research designs? Exploratory, descriptive, and causal. And then from within that design, what is the method that you're using? Are you doing secondary data analysis or focus groups, interviews, observational research, cross-sectional surveys, longitudinal surveys, experiments, test markets? There are different types of methods. And you can drill down even more. Within those, there are other areas too. So for example, you can do interviews. So that is one person talking to the other person. And then there's subgroups of that. So there's executive interviews where you're talking to people who are in leadership positions. There's photo voice where you're having the person you interview provide a picture and explain what that picture means to them. So you're getting down to what is the study design, methods, general design, and then how are you going to get your participants? What is your sampling method? Is it a probability sample, a non-probability sample? Does it represent the greater group? Who is the greater group? And how are you going to go about collecting that information? When it comes to sampling methods, there are different types of probability samples and different types of non-probability samples. We have things called convenience sampling, snowball sampling. There are things, random sampling, stratified sampling. We'll get into all those different ones, but this is where you would specify how you're going to get your group and whether that group is going to be truly representative of the greater population or if the level of representation is unknown. Okay. And then any additional sources of information. So if you are going to be doing a literature review, you're going to be pulling data from other sources. So secondary data analysis, what are those sources? And then we have our areas of questioning. So give some examples of the topics. Sample questions if it's a survey, if it's observational research and it's going to be a checklist, what kind of things are we observing? Maybe it's a focus group, and so we provide a sample discussion guide to show what is what are the talking points. If we go back to the example we were looking at before, this study design, it starts with secondary data analysis. So what already exists in terms of information about the costs related to hockey. Then there is going to be a cross-sectional survey that is conducted of the participants in hockey. And then we have here, in terms of the analysis, there's going to be the forecasting model. And this particular one, we designed it to use students from multiple different classes, a marketing research class, a stats class, a finance class, and then our practicum students would pull it all together. So they were all part of the study design. And so here we have the secondary data analysis is going to include this particular sources of information. We're looking at measures of cost of living with the Alberta Spatial Price Survey. We're looking at published research related to the economic impact of hockey, maybe in other locations. And so this is the sources we're going to use for that particular information. And then when it comes to, here's some examples of other sources. We're going to call some local businesses to talk about, well, do you get people for hockey events coming to your restaurant, coming to your hotel? So outlining different things. Here in terms of the cross-sectional survey, what type of topics are going to be in the survey? We're going to ask about, so the survey is going to be both to those who put on the hockey events and who are the players. For those who put on the events, we're going to ask them about ice rental, purchase of equipment, operating expenses, salary of officials, and so on. For families, those who actually play hockey, we're going to ask about mileage and parking and hotel costs and fuel costs and food costs, whether they go and do other touristy things, and so on. So what we're doing, if we just go back to our list here in terms of, we are looking at the study design and the areas of questioning. So here, sample questions or topics for the different surveys. Okay. In our data analysis section, we will provide some approaches for analyzing the data that is collected. So for example, is there going to be a pilot study first? Are we going to test out the survey on a particular small group or a couple volunteers first before the greater group? And then how are we going to do the analysis? What type of analysis are we going to do? So in terms of coding instructions, how we convert the information we collected into information that can be analyzed, and then what type of statistical methods will we be doing? Are we doing hypothesis testing? Are we doing correlation, regression, and so on? Now, at this point in time, you probably have no idea what is coding or regression, hypothesis, correlation. We're going to have videos on all of those so that you can practice those techniques and practice coding so that we work through the entire research project. You might include in this section some examples of the type of tables and figures that would appear in your final report. So in the example here, I'm going to find my cursor. Let me go to Word document. Okay. Analysis. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the costs. We're going to look at the expenses. In this one, we talk about how we're going to, and just as covered, I think, in other sections, where we're going to look at doing that forecasting and return on investment calculation. As I sift through this, I'll just point out a couple more things to you. You'll notice here it says that we're doing a cross-sectional survey, so one-time survey, and we're using stratified sampling. So with stratified sampling, we want to make sure that there is representation of important groups within the sample. So in this case, we are looking to make sure that the different geographic locations, so we have representation from rural Alberta, from the bigger cities. So we want participation in hockey from the north, from the south. And so when we look at participation in this survey, we want to make sure it represents the strata, the different groups, and that it is proportional to that representation in the population. All right, let's go back. We were looking for analysis methods. Okay. And I think I have it. I think I have it just peppered throughout as opposed to its own section. Yeah, because I combined the design and the analysis here, so that this type of data is collected. Here's the type of analysis that we're doing. So analyzing market conditions and making projections. Here's the type of data we're collecting, the type of analysis that we're doing goes with each. Okay, so I have it kind of grouped as opposed to separated out because it was a multi-stage process. We'll talk later about how to engage people in to participate. This one here, how to draw for gift cards. So the next piece that we have, just going back, is the personnel involved. So who is going to be responsible for each stage of the process? You'll need to outline who those individuals are. You may need to provide resumes or CVs for anyone who is in a supervisory or analytical role. When we look at public sector government work, there's that requirement of those resumes and information about the individuals as opposed to just generic, person one does this, person two does that. All right, so let's look here. Here's the personnel involved in this project. We have 100 students. We have 6 students here. We have work practicum students. We have instructors with expertise in marketing research and stats and finance. So we've outlined all the personnel who are involved in the project. Then the next sections we get to are specifications, assumptions, and services. So any assumptions made to create the proposal, assumptions that correspond with the statistical methodology that we're using, right? So assumptions about representation of our sample, assumptions about the data itself in order to allow us to do regression, correlation, that type of analysis. And then the services, we said who's going to do what are the expectations, especially if you have the company hiring a researcher, what is expected of the one who's paying the researcher, and what is the expectations of the researcher, and the costs associated with that. So here in this case, what you see is that Hockey Alberta, the company that's hiring the researchers, will do these pieces here. The students and instructors who are doing the research will do these pieces here. And then here are some costs that are associated with the project itself. So we're paying our practicum students, we have coordination fees, and then the piece we see here is the timeline. So when will each of these deliverables be met? And then your appendix can have things like determination of the appropriate sample size, or any additional comments or information that you feel is useful to explain what you're doing or the impact it will have on the organization. Okay, so just lastly, as we're working through, here's the timing, when the phases of the project will be complete, when the entire project will be completed, so lining it out. And then appendix. Your appendix can also, if you already have it built out, that might be your full survey. That might be any additional information about process, or as we said, any technical or statistical information that would otherwise interrupt the flow of the text. So the appendix is where the nitty-gritty details live. If it's just kind of too detailed, too far down a rabbit hole for the proposal itself. So you might include it in the appendix. Anything in the appendix, you're going to be referencing somewhere else. So here's our sampling method. We're going to survey X number of people, see the appendix for that calculation of how we came up with X number of people. So anything that is just too detailed would interrupt the flow of the text ends up in the appendix. Okay. So we've gone through the different components of the marketing research proposal from title page to the appendix. When you have a research proposal, whether you are providing it to your boss as part of an internal process or to the company that hired you, what you want is it to be signed and dated. So this is a contractual agreement to do the work and how the work will be assessed. So you want to make sure that both those who are doing the research and those who are approving it, paying for it, sign off on that proposal.